Visions of the Black Heaven, written by Daniel Zien and read by Daniel Zien. Small clouds of frozen mist formed as his right gloved hand steadied the door. His left gloved hand inserted the key into the lock. It opened with a sharp snap. He enjoyed the sound of the welcome bell as the door opened and hated the sound of a squeaky door hinge. The squeaky noise robbed him of the calm control his door offered, a calm control he enjoyed and demanded. He oiled the hinges weakly. Closing the door and walking his customary 12 steps into the small but efficient store, he passed the 3 red sculptured Victorian chairs, 2 gray and white marble-top end tables, being pleased with the positioning of the furniture, 2 chairs and end table on the south wall, and 1 chair and end table on the north wall. He smiled, remembering the Johnsons had sold him the furniture at a fair price when they decided to move out west. He walked past his displays of antiques, watches, rings, gold, and precious collectibles. One of his favorite, which a Miss Alice Strader had sold him, was a woman's golden pendant watch. It was not the pendant that was so special, but its unique shape was larger than most women's watches and had a cover that made it desirable. The cover was solid gold, fashioned like an iris in full bloom, with a diamond in the middle of the petals. It had a delicate 2-foot gold chain with small opals in the decorative choker. He had never seen anything like it. Inside the cover was engraved A. Strader, with a date, July 4th, 1893. Every time he held the watch, he felt a strange sensation of power, confidence, and pride. He walked past counters made of oak, walnut, and mahogany, displays showing his collection of firearms, Remington and Colt pistols, the Winchester and Springfield rifles. Every man wanted the best pistol, the Colt 1873, the Peacemaker, or the Remington Beals, the 1858 revolver. The Springfield 1875 lever-action .45 caliber rifle was his next most popular firearm in the store. Next were his displays of men's pocket knives of all fashions and sizes. He had pocket knives with bone, wood, and mother-of-pearl handles, 2, 3, and 4-blade knives displayed under locked case. It was said that the first pocket knife we know of was found in a Central European Hallstatt culture, which existed around 600 BC, and that every man needs a capable pocket knife. One never knows when such tools are necessary. There was a display of men's pocket watches, the gold open and closed face on the right, the silver open and closed face on the left. Each had its own story. Smiling to himself as he reached into his vest pocket to feel his favorite, a closed-face Waltham watch. The gold cover had a unique display of the 6-point Star of David. On the wall behind the counters were a variety of Swiss and German-made cuckoo, mantle, and grandfather clocks, which sat idle. He did not allow the pieces to chime. Some chimed on the hour, some chimed on the half hour, and some chimed on the quarter hour. And the noise distracted the customers. In reality, the customers did not mind the noisy clocks. He just did not like the clock's constant ticking and chiming. At the back of the store, he put several pieces of kindling and 3 hickory logs into the belly of the blackwood stove, his gloved fingers fumbling, striking the red and white tipped wooden match against the stove's cast iron belly. The sulfur tip exploded into orange and red flames. Throwing the burning match on the resinwood kindling, the fire started to burn. Walking across the back of his wall to his desk, he heard his footsteps echo under the wooden floor as he passed the wall of displays and bookshelves. He touched the hidden lever inside of one of the shelves that locked a false door to a secret room and his safe from people who did not need to know what he had or where he put his most valued possessions. Sitting down at the wooden chair mentioned his desk, he inserted the skeleton key into the lock, and the wooden cover rolled up inside the desk effortlessly. Opening the top drawer, pushing his Smith & Wesson Derringer aside, he pulled out his daily ledger to start an entry. Business transactions, December 21st, 1897. Leaning back in his chair to read the morning paper and wait for his first customer of the day, he smiled, listening to the crackling of the fire, feeling the heat, smelling the aroma of the hickory wood. The welcome doorbell rang, announcing the first customer of the day. Looking up over his paper, he felt a rush of cold air, watching a tall, slender man walk in and close the door. His riding coat hung open and showed no signs of a gun belt. His hat and clothes were dusty. His jeans showed signs of saddle wear. He assumed the stranger had been riding a long time. The stranger carried a double saddlebag over his right shoulder, a saddlebag which appeared to be full, and a burlap sack in his left hand. The burlap sack swung in step as the stranger walked. The stranger held his head high but wore his hat low. The hat's rim covered his eyes and looked dusty, weathered, and worn. Looking over his paper, he watched and listened to the stranger's slow, strong steps. Steps that did not reveal a state of panic, like most customers did. The stranger silently put the burlap sack and saddlebags on the glass-covered counter. He heard himself say in a dialect not his own, "G'day, partner," as he got up from his desk, walking to the counter to meet his new customer. The stranger stood silently, eyes covered by the rim of his hat. Walking with a spring in his step, he once again looked him over, trying to get a friendly conversation to break the uncomfortable feeling and get a sense of what this stranger wanted. "What do we have here?" he heard himself say. The rim of the hat rose to reveal the stranger's eyes and face. He was taken back by the deepest, darkest, most intense blue eyes he had ever seen. Eyes that had a razor-sharp focus. Eyes that seemed to be able to look right through you and peer into the very core of your soul. Standing behind the counter, feeling uncomfortable, he realized that he had seen every kind of eyes imaginable. Scared, desperate, lying, happy, bored, sad, corrupt, and yes, even mean eyes. He prided himself in his ability to read a person's eyes and know if they were desperate, fake, or just evil. But the eyes of this stranger were different. This stranger had a young-looking face with old, wise eyes. The face was expressionless. The only movement was his constant razor-sharp focus. He looked into a face as solid and motionless as a stone statue. The stranger opened the burlap bag and brought out a large bronze helmet, then put the helmet in his hands. It was cold and had to weigh at least 20 pounds. It had a strange writing on top, and sides showed signs of dents and scuffs of battle wear. Again the burlap bag opened. 7 metal spearheads appeared. Each spearhead 8 to 14 inches long and weighed up to 10 pounds. The spearheads were made with an opening large enough to mount it to a handle the size of a small log. The spearhead showed sharp edges that had been dulled through use. The burlap bag opened again to reveal a dagger with a metal sheath. The dagger was about 20 inches long and had a large loop on top of the metal sheath. The dagger was made for a hand more massive than his, and had several gems inlaid into the base of the handle. He had never seen anything like it. The stranger silently handed the dagger to him. It almost looked like a dirk, but not as elaborate. The dagger's blade made a tinny noise of metal scraping metal as it was pulled out of its sheath. Its razor-sharp edge glistened in the sunlight, and he thought he knew what the dark, splotched stains on the strange wooden handle was. This is a rare and unique find, he thought to himself. All the articles were made of a wood and metal he had never seen before. The workmanship was magnificent. The detail was exact, and each article displayed the same form of writing. Several minutes of inspecting the articles, he carefully put the items on the counter, knowing the saddlebag had something in it. He waited to be shown the next exhibit. The stranger opened the saddlebag and pulled out a golden disc about 6 inches round, thicker in the middle and thinner on the edges. Suddenly the stranger put the object in his hands. It was cool to the touch. It looked like gold. It was heavy like gold, and it had that smooth, creamy feel of gold. Examining the article carefully, he observed that it was not a disc per se, but more like a medallion. The medallion had the same kind of writing on the face and edges, and the rim as the other articles. He thought to himself, I have seen many languages of the Egyptians from 3000 BC, and writings of the Sumerians written in a cuneiform style. Yet this writing does not resemble either of these. The writing almost seems to be symbolic of ideas, like the Asian languages, where each figure has a meaning unto itself. But these figures are not as complex as those of the Asian languages. He carefully examined the medallion. On one side of the medallion was displayed a picture of a solar system with 12 planets. It clearly showed the sun with 12 orbiting objects. Each planet had a position, and all the planets seemed to have a flat orbit in this solar system. On the other side of the medallion was a picture of 2 men. One looked like a warrior, and the other looked like a farmer. Looking away from the article, he saw that the stranger's face had not changed. His eyes were expressionless, stone cold, revealing no emotion. The stranger's hand reached into the saddlebag and brought out another kind of medallion. This one different. It had a gold core and what looked to be some kind of cloth or fiber coating on its surface, with writing on the gold-rimmed edges. The stranger's hand reached into the saddlebag again to retrieve 2 more gold medallions and 2 more gray medallions. Looking into the eyes of the stranger, he wondered where he had found these artifacts. Hurrying to the front door, he twisted the key in the lock, flipping the sign to read closed. As he turned back toward the stranger, he felt a moist heat and smelled a scent of humid, rotting vegetation. He saw something in the corner of his eye, a shadow. Feeling his face contort in a strange question, he wondered where that stench might be coming from. It was in the middle of winter. There was no sign of vegetation anywhere, let alone rotting vegetation. The thought of the shadow in the corner of his vision puzzled him. But right now he was too busy trying to finalize his purchase to be concerned with that thought. He wanted this stranger's articles, but he did not want to show his desire. Slowly walking back to the counter, he was frustrated. He could read anyone's mind, but this stranger was different. This stranger had not moved, didn't seem to breathe, and still had not even blinked his eyes. As he walked behind the counter to face the stranger, he heard himself say, "Well, we got some interesting things you have here. I'm sure we can do some business today." Thinking for a moment, he spoke a number, then watched the stranger's expression. It did not change. Yet his actions spoke volumes as he shook his head in an almost imperceptible no. Thinking for another moment, he spoke another figure. Again the stranger shook his head no. Frustrated, he thought for a few more seconds. Quickly calculating, he offered another figure. No. Taking one of the medallions, holding it up, feeling the cool metal in his hands, he knew gold, and this was positively gold. It had that feel of gold. He knew the pieces were priceless, The etchings and carvings were worth more than the gold would be all by itself. He wanted these pieces, and he wanted them bad. Just before putting the medallions on the counter, he felt the same hot, moist air and smelled the same pungent stench as before. Suddenly, a wave of panic developed as the thought of losing the sale crossed his mind. He forced a smile, feeling beads of sweat form on his face. He was experiencing a deep desire, a strange need, almost a lust to have these objects in his possession. A shortness of breath, cold sweat, lightheadedness overcame him. He quickly made another offer, knowing that he was offering almost all that he had, and this would put him out of business if he could not move some pieces fast. The stranger nodded a silent yes. Smiling, he gathered up the articles to take them in back of his office. He felt a searing pain in his wrist. Looking up, he saw the stranger's hand had caught his arm in a vice-like grip, a grip of strength that he had never experienced before. Looking into the stranger's face, his eyes exploded with anger, almost hatred. Knowing what the stranger meant, he left the items on the counter. He felt the stranger's eyes watch him as he hurried to the back of the store, reached in the shelf, turned the lever to open the secret room. Behind the wall, his nervous fingers fumbled with the lock, twisting the combination over and over until he finally got the combination right. The large safe door opened with a soft click. The light revealed stacks of paper money. Each stack counted out to the same denomination. He needed more than the cash on hand. The light shone on bags of gold and silver bullion, each bag tagged with the exact weight and value. Counting the exact negotiated amount, he put the money in a leather bag. He tied the bag shut and walked back to the counter. He handed the bag to the stranger. He watched the satchel of money disappear into the stranger's saddlebag. Then the stranger silently walked out the door, mounted his horse, and rode down the street. After the stranger had rode away, he went outside and waved the cowboy down. "Follow that rider. Tell me where he goes. Tell me where he lives, and there will be $100 in it if you are successful." "Yes, sir," the cowboy shouted, and took off after the stranger. He told another cowboy, "Tell the telegraph operator to come to my store," handed him a $5 gold piece. "Yes, sir," shouted the cowboy, and ran down the street. A few minutes later, the telegraph operator knocked on the storefront door and entered. Looking at the small, frail man's eager eyes, he said, "Send this message as soon as possible. To Boston, stop. Rare find, stop. Come to Chicago immediately, stop. Sign my name to it." He handed the telegraph operator a $20 gold piece, and the telegraph operator ran out the door. Walking back to his store, he closed and locked the door and carried the articles to his desk. He then found his book about ancient languages. Striking a match, he put the flame to the oil lamp wick. The flame glowed. He sat down, opened the book, and started looking at the pages of the many languages listed. Sitting back in his chair, his eyes stung from reading. Looking out the window, he noticed the sun setting and realized how long he had been sitting at his desk. He saw his reflection in the window. He smelled the same putrid stench and felt the humid heat as before. Sitting higher in his chair, he looked into the front window, watching darkness cover the landscape. He saw his reflection sitting behind his desk and sensed a wave of disbelief as his images in the reflection moved from behind the desk and changed windows. His suit was replaced with a leather and burlap garment. His chest was covered with an armored breastplate with the same writing as the medallions. He watched the shadows move in the window's reflections, the shadows on the walls, shadows on the store displays. It was like seeing shadows of shadows. He heard the distant echoes of words. "La Chille de Fort." Silently, Watching the reflections, he listened to the words until the reflections and shadows vanished as the sun slowly set behind the horizon. He returned his attention to the book and medallions sitting before him on his desk. The oil lamp flame created a cacophony of light and shadows that danced on the walls, ceiling, and floor. Using a magnifying glass, he looked carefully at the etchings on the gold surface. A sense of satisfaction and awe overcame him as he felt the medallion's creamy, smooth, pure gold rest in his hand. A creamy, smooth feel that only a real expert in gold could detect. He liked that smooth feel of pure gold. He ran his fingers over the gold again and again, enjoying the sensation of pure pleasure the gold gave him. Feeling a shiver, he exhaled deeply, seeing a cloud of frozen white mist form before him. He could not move. His fingers, arms, legs, and back hurt. His head was still lowered, eyes still fixed on the gold medallions sitting before him. His body was stiff from sitting in one position all night long. He exhaled deeply, watching another cloud of frozen mist form between himself and the medallions. Raising his head, he looked out the window and saw the morning sun start to peek over the city's horizon. The sunrise creating shades of light and shadows on the streets and buildings visible from his store window. He realized that he had been sitting at his desk looking at his new possessions all night long, but did not remember 1 minute of it. Looking at the paper in front of him, he read the phrase written in his hand, La Chambre de Four. He had written the phrase in large letters, small letters, letters pressed hard, letters brushed softly, the words written over and over and over again. Opening his desk drawer, he found his ledger, recorded the purchase of December 21st, 1897.